The thing about humanity's admission into the Galactic Coalition was that nobody had bothered to read the fine print. Oh sure, the Council had skimmed. The application noted the species designation, acknowledged that Earth possessed rudimentary faster-than-light capability, and rubber-stamped the whole affair with the enthusiasm of a bureaucrat 3 minutes before lunch break. What they hadn't anticipated was that humans would treat everything, including higher education at prestigious militaremies, like a competitive blood sport station. Prometheus 7 hung in the darkness between star systems like a particularly aggressive chandelier, all sharp angles and defensive arrays. The Celestial Defense Academy had educated the Coalition's finest warriors for 3 centuries, which meant its halls had seen every conceivable form of combat prowess, scaled behemoths from high-gravity worlds, ethereal energy beings who could phase through solid matter, 6-limbed predators with reaction times measured in micros seconds. And then there was Ren. Ren was human, which already marked her as something of a statistical anomaly in a galaxy that had largely written off Sol 3 as that death world with the enthusiastic primates. She stood at an unremarkable height, possessed an unremarkable build, and had unremarkable brown hair that she kept tied back in a manner that suggested she'd rather be setting things on fire than styling it. What was remarkable, much to the consternation of species with millennia of warrior traditions, was her winning streak, 43 consecutive victories in the combat simulation arena, 43 alien warriors who'd limped back to their dorms wondering if perhaps their ancestors had been too hasty in abandoning ritualized combat in favor of diplomatic solutions. The current record holder, for context, was a V-Nath battle master who'd managed 37 wins before getting cocky and challenging Gravity Well to single combat. The Gravity Well had won. Your aggression parameters are still reading abnormally high, observed Burroughs, the Academy's senior combat instructor, reviewing Ren's latest neural scan with the air of someone discovering mold in their lunch. Burroughs belonged to a species that resembled what would happen if an octopus and a philosophy professor had a regrettable incident involving exotic radiation. His 3 primary eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture his students had learned meant deep concern or mild indigestion. This level of competitive drive is unusual, is it? Interfering with my performance, Ren asked, which was her polite way of saying, am I winning or not? No, Burroughs admitted, manipulating the holographic display with 2 of his 7 manipulator limbs. That's what concerns me. Your species treats combat training as though someone has personally insulted your genetic line. It's unsettling. Ren smiled, which didn't help Baraz's blood pressure. Human smiles, he discovered, could mean anything from genuine pleasure to prelude to violence, and sometimes both simultaneously. The training hall was a cathedral too. Controlled mayhem, a vast space where artificial gravity could be adjusted to simulate everything from the crushing pressure of a super-Earth to the disorienting weightlessness of void combat. Along one wall, various species practiced their forms. Jhana, crystalline being whose body refracted light into dizzying patterns, moved through a kata that looked like geometry, achieving sentience. Pax, who resembled a very confused bear that had been stretched vertically and given too much Coffee was attempting to master the art of not breaking everything he touched. The advancement medal hung in its case, near the instructor's platform, catching the light like a tiny metallic challenge. It wasn't particularly large or ostentatious, just a simple disc of composite metals from a dozen coalition worlds. What it represented, however, was considerably more valuable. First, choice of postings after graduation, a full scholarship to advanced tactical programs, and most importantly, bragging rights. Ren had been 3 weeks away from claiming it, 3 weeks of maintaining her streak, 3 weeks of not getting cocky, 3 weeks of proving that humanity deserved a seat at the big kids' table. Then Eli showed up. The transfer student arrived with the kind of timing usually reserved for dramatic irony and natural disasters. He walked into the training hall during advanced melee protocols, which was already a breach of etiquette, and proceeded to watch the ongoing matches with an expression that suggested he was mentally cataloging everyone's weaknesses for future exploitation. Eli was also human, which made Ren's eye twitch in a way that Burroughs had learned to recognize as the prelude to someone having a very bad day. He was tall, moved with the controlled economy of someone who'd spent too much time in combat armor, and possessed the kind of face that would be handsome if it weren't currently arranged in an expression of calculated assessment. Ah, said Burroughs, his translator unit struggling to convey the full depth of his resignation. Another one. Another human? Asked Jana, pausing her practice to observe the newcomer with the interest of someone watching a potentially explosive chemical reaction. Worse, Burroughs replied, another human from their military program. The last one tried to challenge the station's automated defense grid to a duel. How did that resolve? Pax inquired, his massive form casting shadows across half the training floor. The defense grid now has anxiety protocols installed in its programming. Eli's gaze swept the training hall and landed on Ren with the precision of a targeting system. Achieving luck, something passed between them in that moment, some fundamental human recognition that made every other species in the room suddenly very interested in being elsewhere. Is that the famous Ren? Eli asked Burroughs, his voice carrying that particular brand of casual confidence that suggested he'd never met a challenge he didn't immediately want to accept. That depends, Ren replied before Burroughs could formulate a diplomatic response. Are you the infamous Eli who got kicked out of the Earth Defense Forces Advanced Program for creative interpretation of the rules of engagement? Eli smiled. Could have cut glass. Creative victory is still victory, so is technically not losing while everyone else does the actual work. The temperature in the training hall seemed to drop several degrees, which was impressive given that the environmental systems were regulated by AI that didn't believe in metaphorical atmospheric changes. Burroughs made a sound like a sigh being dragged through a compression chamber. Humans, he muttered to Yana, have a courtship ritual that involves determining if their potential mate could kill them in single combat. I'm increasingly convinced this is not a joke. Should we intervene? Jana asked, her crystalline structure humming with concern. No, said Burroughs, pulling up the incident report forms on his data pad with the weary expertise of someone who'd done this before. We document the council want detailed notes on human behavioral Patterns for the xenopsychology department. Eli had moved closer to the display case, examining the advancement. Metal with the kind of attention usually reserved for reading hostile intent. Pretty little thing, he observed. Shame. If someone were to earn it or steal it, Wren asked, moving to stand between him and the case with the territorial instinct of someone guarding their kill. Is there a difference in combat? Yes, Wren said flatly. One involves honor, the other involves being the kind of person who needs to sleep with a mirror to feel loved. Pax made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Even Burroughs's translator unit seemed to pause, as if uncertain how to process that particular insult across cultural boundaries. The tournament, Eli said, apparently unbothered by the verbal assault, is in 2 weeks, correct? Correct, Burroughs confirmed, resignation heavy in his mechanical voice. Good, Eli replied, his smile widening. That gives me just enough time to prepare to take that medal. He turned and left the training hall with the confidence of someone who just declared war and was looking forward to the opening battle. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for the moment after someone realizes they've made a terrible mistake, but before the consequences arrive. Well, said Jonna finally, her voice chiming like distant bells, this is going to end in either a spectacular disaster or a spectacular relationship. Possibly both, with humans, Burroughs muttered, filing his first incident report of what he suspected would be many. It's always both. Wren stood staring at the door Eli had exited through, her hands clenched at her sides. Her expression suggested she was calculating trajectories, force vectors, and exactly how many regulations she could bend without technically breaking them. Instructor, she said quietly, I'd like to request additional training time to prepare for the tournament. To prepare for murder, Wren corrected. Legal sanctioned, technically within the rules. Murder. Burroughs updated his report to include a probability assessment for catastrophic property damage. The algorithm returned a value of 97%, which seemed optimistic. Somewhere in the administrative offices, an alert flagged in the academy's behavioral monitoring systems. 2 humans, both with exceptional combat ratings, both with documented competitive tendencies, now in direct conflict over a symbol of status and achievement. The AI running the betting pools for the upcoming tournament recalculated its odds 17 times in 3 seconds before crashing entirely, unable to process the variables involved predicting human behavior under conditions of romantic and martial tension in the depths of the station. Environmental controls prepared for increased power consumption in the training areas. The tournament, everyone silently agreed, was going to be memorable, assuming anyone survived it. Tournament day arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova at a meditation retreat. The main arena had been configured for maximum spectacle, which, in galactic terms, meant multiple gravitational zones, environmental hazards that could liquefy the unprepared, and seating for approximately 3,000 spectators who'd paid good money to watch students beat each other senseless in the name of education. The betting pools had reopened after emergency maintenance, though the AI still twitched whenever someone mentioned the human brackets. Wren arrived 2 hours early, which was either dedication or obsession. Depending on who you asked, she'd spent the past 2 weeks training with the kind of focus usually associated with religious experiences or hostile programming. Jana had helped her analyze combat footage. Pax had served as a practice dummy, which he'd enjoyed far more than was probably healthy, even. Burroughs had contributed, offering cryptic advice about finding balance between aggression and strategy, then immediately filing paperwork to request hazard pay. The early rounds were, to put it charitably, educational in the way that watching someone discover fire by accidentally setting themselves ablaze is educational. A Horian champion, all chitinous plates and serrated limbs, faced off against a Centauri diplomat warrior who could manipulate localized magnetic fields. The match lasted 47 seconds before the Horian realized that having metal-based armor near someone who could create magnetic anomalies was what the humans called a tactical oversight. He was found later stuck to the ceiling, contemplating his life choices. Pax fought next, his massive frame giving him reach advantage against a nimble Pelrathi scout. The problem with being large and strong, as Pax discovered, was that agility-focused opponents treated you like mobile terrain. He spent most of the match trying to grab someone who kept using his shoulders as a launching platform. The judges called it after they Pelri managed to tie Pax's arms together using his own momentum. In the post-match interview, Pax admitted he was still not entirely sure what happened, but it was probably impressive. Ren's first match was against a Zethian Blademaster, a species known for having 4 arms and approximately 0 chill when it came to edged combat. The Zethion entered the arena with 4 viral weapons, each humming with enough energy to slice through hull plating. Ren entered with knuckle grips and what Burroughs had described as that expression humans get when they're about to do something that will require extensive incident reports. The match began with traditional formalities which the Zethian observed with the precision of someone who'd studied for centuries. Then combat commenced and ran immediately through sand in all 4 of the Zethian's eyes. "Is that legal?" someone in the crowd asked. Burroughs checked his data pad. "Technically, environmental manipulation is allowed." She brought sand to a weapon fight. She brought preparedness to a weapon fight. Burroughs corrected. "There's a difference." While the Zethion flailed, Ren closed distance, got inside the reach of all 4 blades, and proceeded to demonstrate why humans had developed extensive grappling techniques. The match ended with the Zethion tapping out furiously, all 4 hands slapping the mat in rapid succession. In the medical bay afterward, the Zethion was heard muttering something about humans and their complete disregard for martial elegance. Eli's matches were different. Not better, not worse, just profoundly different in a way that made the judges reconsider their understanding of combat sports. His first opponent was a brawl heavy fighter, a species that resembled ambulatory mountains with anger management issues. The conventional approach would be to avoid direct confrontation, use speed and technique to overcome raw power. Eli walked directly into the brawl's opening, charged, took a hit that should have hospitalized him, and used the momentum to flip himself up and over, landing on the brawl's shoulders. Before anyone could process what had happened, he'd wrapped his legs around the brawl's neck and was calmly applying pressure to Specific nerve clusters he absolutely shouldn't have known about. The brawl went down like a collapsing building. How did he know brawl physiology? Jana asked, her crystalline form flickering with confusion. Humans, Burroughs said, wearily, have a disturbing tendency to study anything they might eventually fight. It's a survival trait from their home world. What did they fight on their home world? Everything, including each other, especially each other. Eli's second match involved a fairing phase fighter who could temporarily shift out of sync with normal space-time. Standard tactics were useless because you couldn't hit what wasn't technically there. Eli apparently hadn't read the manual on standard tactics. He spent the first minute of the match doing nothing, just standing in the center of the arena with his eyes closed. The fine circled, phased in and out, testing for openings. Then Eli moved, not toward where the fine was, but where he would be after. Phase shifting, he timed it perfectly, catching the fine mid-materialization with a strike that shouldn't have been possible to predict. The arena went silent. He's reading phase differentials, Jana whispered, her voice gone quiet with something approaching awe or horror. He's reading patterns, Burroughs corrected. Humans are exceptional at pattern recognition. It's how they predict prey behavior, weather changes, and apparently quantum adjacent phenomenon. The fairing didn't last another minute. By the time the finals arrived, the entire academy had packed into the arena. Students who'd never shown interest in combat sports suddenly discovered passionate opinions about human fighting styles. The betting pools had crashed again. Somewhere a xenopsychology professor was writing a thesis that would make her career. Ren and Eli faced each other across the arena floor, and the tension was thick enough to require anti-gravitic compensation. Fancy meeting you here, Eli said, his casual tone completely at odds with the controlled violence radiating from his stance. I'd say likewise, but I'm not surprised, Ren replied. Cockroaches always survive. That's the spirit. Nothing says I respect my opponent like comparing them to insects. I respect your ability to irritate. It's genuinely impressive. Omir, the tournament referee and a being composed primarily of organized light, pulsed with the color frequency that meant, for the love of entropy, can we just start the match? His species had abandoned physical bodies specifically to avoid this kind of tedious biological drama. The opening bell chimed, a pure tone that seemed to make the air vibrate. They moved simultaneously, which was both predictable and terrible. Ren opened with a feint, testing Eli's reactions. He didn't take the bait, instead circling to control distance. She adjusted, pressing forward with a combination that would have overwhelmed her previous opponents. Eli deflected, redirected, and countered with an efficiency that suggested he'd been studying her matches as thoroughly as she'd been studying his. It became immediately clear that this wasn't going to be a quick fight. They traded strikes, each exchanged a conversation. Violence, Ren's style was direct, aggressive, built on the principle that the best defense was overwhelming offense. Eli was adaptive, responsive, turning enemy momentum into counterattacks. 5 minutes in, both were bleeding from minor cuts. 10 minutes in, the crowd had gone from cheering to watching in stunned silence. 15 minutes in, Burroughs was updating his medical preparedness protocols. They're going to kill each other, Pax observed, his massive form leaning forward with Concern, worse, Jana corrected there. Evenly matched, this could go on indefinitely. Ren shifted tactics, going for a grapple. That would leverage her lower center of gravity. Eli read it, started to counter, then seemed to reconsider at the last possible microcond. He let her get the hold, then used it to throw himself backward, turning her momentum against her. They hit the mat hard, enough to trigger arena sensors. What happened next would be debated in combat analysis classes for years. Eli had position, leverage, and what should have been a submission lock. Ren had determination, flexibility that shouldn't have been anatomically possible, and apparently a complete disregard for ligament safety. She twisted, he compensated. She shifted weight, he countered. They rolled across the arena floor like a complex physics problem achieving consciousness. Then Eli did something that made every combat instructor in the audience WSC. He grabbed Ren's arm at an angle that technically wasn't a joint lock, technically wasn't illegal, but definitely qualified as what humans called a dick move. It used a pressure point that temporarily scrambled nerve signals, causing her grip to falter for just a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. Eli reversed their position, secured an actual submission hold, and before Ren could formulate a counter, Omir's light pulsed with the color of match completion. The arena remained silent for approximately 3 seconds, which is an eternity when thousands of beings are trying to process what they've just witnessed. Eli stood breathing hard and offered Ren his hand. She stared at it like it was a live explosive. Then she stood on her own, ignored his hand entirely, and walked out of the arena with her back straight and her expression locked in a neutrality that somehow projected more threat than any violence could. Eli watched her go, his expression shifting through several emotions too quickly to identify. Well, he said to the arena at large, that went well. Nobody laughed. The medal ceremony happened in what could only be described as aggressive silence. Iris, the academy administrator and one of the few humans in a non-combat role, presented Eli with the advancement medal with all the enthusiasm of someone handing over evidence at a trial. Congratulations, she said flatly. Try not to get murdered in your sleep. Does that happen often? Eli asked. We're about to find out. In the stands, Burroughs was already composing his report. He titled A Case Study in Human Competitive Pair Bonding Rituals Part 1. The provocation phase. His supervisor would later ask why he'd labeled it Part 1. Burroughs, with the weary wisdom of someone who'd seen this pattern before with other species, replied, because this is humans. There's always a Part 2, and it's always worse. In the corridor outside the arena, Ren stood alone, staring at her reflection in a viewport. Behind her reflection, stars moved in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama. She touched the spot on her arm where Eli's pressure point strike had landed. It still tingled, signals misfiring in confusion. Her expression shifted into something that made her reflection look briefly dangerous. Okay, she said to the stars, to herself, to whatever was listening. He wants to play technical. Let's see how he handles comprehensive. Somewhere in his newly assigned quarters, Eli was examining the map. He'd won. It was nice, well-crafted, a symbol of achievement. It felt hollow. He set it down and pulled up Ren's combat profile on his data pad. Beginning a detailed analysis he suspected he'd need sooner rather than later. On both their records, a notification appeared, paired assignment for advanced survival protocols, team composition non-negotiable. The Academy's AI, having recovered from its betting pool trauma, calculated the probability of both students surviving the assignment at a solid 63%. Then it recalculated, accounting for human stubbornness, cooperation, resistance, and proximity-based conflict escalation. The new probability was 41%, with a margin of error that looked suspiciously like a digital shrug. Tournament day ended with Eli holding a medal and Ren holding a grudge. The smart money, what little remained in the functional betting pools, was on the grudge. The thing about obsession is that it looks remarkably similar to dedication until someone checks the browser history. Ren's data pad had become a shrine to strategic planning, combat footage, physiological weaknesses, reaction time analysis, dietary habits that might affect performance. If information about Eli existed in the Academy database, Ren had accessed it, cross-referenced it, and weaponized it. This is concerning. Jana observed her crystalline form refracting the glow of multiple screens. In Ren's quarters, you've watched his third match 47 times. 48, Ren corrected, replaying a sequence frame by frame. There's a tell in his left shoulder before he commits to grappling. Microsecond delay. You're developing countermeasures to microsecond delays. I'm developing countermeasures too. Everything. PAX occupying approximately half the available floor space made a sound like worried gravel. The paired assignment briefing is in 2 hours. You'll have to work together. I can work with him, Ren said, her tone suggesting she could also work with a live grenade, but preferred not to. Professionally, efficiently, right up until the moment I get my rematch. The paired assignment was Boris's idea of either team building or species compatibility testing. Students were sent into the Academy's deep simulation zones, environments that replicated everything from hostile planetary surfaces to derelict spacecraft. Objective was simple: survive 72 hours. Complete mission parameters: don't die. In ways that required extensive paperwork, teams were assigned algorithmically to maximize learning potential, which was administrator speak, for deliberately create friction and see what happens. Ren and Eli. Non-negotiable. Burroughs had included a smiley face in the assignment notification, which everyone agreed was deeply unsettling coming from a species without a traditional face. The briefing room was designed for intimidation, all dark surfaces and holographic threat assessments. Iris stood at the front looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Your scenario, she began, manipulating the display, is a failed colony ship. Life support is degrading. Hostile automated systems are active. You have limited equipment. The objective is to reach the escape pods before catastrophic failure. Sounds simple, Eli said from his seat across the room. It's not, Iris replied flatly. The mortality rate for this scenario is 12%. That's actually not bad, Ren observed. That's the mortality rate for teams that cooperate. The silence that followed had weight. You'll be monitored, Iris continued. Intervention will occur only if death becomes probable rather than possible. Medical teams are standing by. Your gear is standard loadout. No modifications, no special requests. She fixed both humans with a look that could have flash frozen hydrogen. The Academy has invested considerable resources in your education. Try not to waste that investment by killing each other in creative ways. No promises, Ren and Eli said simultaneously, then glared at each other for the audacity of synchronized speech. The simulation began 6 hours later. The colony ship materialized around them in uncomfortable detail, failing lights, atmosphere thick with recycled air gone stale, the distant sound of systems dying and cascading failure. Eli checked his equipment with practice efficiency. Standard combat knife, emergency beacon, portable scanner, ration pack that looked like compressed regret. Ren was already moving, heading toward what her scanner indicated was the main corridor. Shouldn't we establish a plan? Eli called after her. The plan is don't die and get to the pods. Feel free to complicate it with strategy. You're still angry about the tournament. Ren stopped, turned, and her smile could have strip paint. Angry implies emotional investment. I'm simply looking forward to our inevitable rematch where I demonstrate the full range of pressure points I've been studying. Did you know humans have 17 particularly sensitive nerve clusters? I've memorized all of them. That's disturbingly specific. I'm a disturbingly specific person. They moved through the dying ship in hostile silence, each taking point. Alternatively, neither trusting the other completely, but both competent enough to avoid immediate disaster. The first hostile system activated when they reached the engineering section. Automated defense drones, pre-collapse security that couldn't distinguish between intruders and survivors. 3 drones, Milidar Ryra, targeting, limited cover. Ren went left, Eli went right. Neither communicated the plan, but both executed it with a synchronization of people who understood combat geometry. Ren drew fire, her movements erratic enough to confuse targeting algorithms. Eli flanked, using debris for cover, and disabled the first drone with a thrown piece of shrapnel that severed a critical sensor array. The second drone tracked Ren as she rolled behind a collapsed bulkhead. It never saw Eli coming from above, dropping from a damaged catwalk to land directly on its chassis, his knife finding the processing core with surgical precision. The third drone recalculated, identified both targets as high threat, and prepared to fire at maximum output. Then Ren threw her emergency beacon directly into its intake vent. The resulting electromagnetic pulse was beautiful, brief, and completely fried the drone systems. They stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, surrounded by sparking wreckage. Nice throw, Eli admitted. Nice knife work, Ren replied. Then they both seemed to remember they were supposed to hate each other and looked away simultaneously. In the monitoring station, Burroughs watched the playback with interest. 47 seconds. He noted they cleared a 3-drone encounter in 47 seconds. They're good, Jana observed. They're better together, Burroughs corrected, which is going to make the inevitable relationship drama so much more entertaining to document. Back in the simulation, Ren and Eli had reached the central hub. The escape pods were 3 levels up through sections that were losing atmosphere at measurable rates. We should move fast, Eli said. Obviously, I meant we should move fast together, as In coordinated movement, Ren looked at really looked at him for the first time since the tournament. His expression was serious, professional, without any of the cocky confidence from before. Fine, she said, but after this we're scheduling that rematch, looking forward to it. They moved toward the escape pods, and for the first time since meeting, they moved as a team. The rematch happened 3 weeks later, and the entire academy turned out like it was a religious experience, which in a way it was. The mythology of the first fight had grown in the retelling until people were claiming they'd seen actual sparks when fists connected, which was physically improbable but emotionally accurate. The stakes had evolved. Winner received the prestigious Earth Embassy posting. Loser got frontier assignment on a mining station where the most exciting event was biannual supply deliveries. Ren entered the arena first, her expression carved from stone and bad intentions. She'd spent 3 weeks studying, training, and preparing countermeasures to countermeasures every microsecond delay, every habitual movement pattern, every psychological tell. Eli entered second, and he was carrying something, small box, which he set on the mat between them before Omir could start the match. What's this? Ren asked, suspicious of anything that wasn't violence. Your emergency beacon from the simulation. She stared at him. You kept it. You threw it into a drone to save both our lives. Seemed worth keeping. He paused. You could have used it for yourself. Called for extraction. Let me handle the drones alone. That would have been stupid. That would have been tactically sound. Since when do you care about tactical soundness over creative victory? Eli smiled, and it was different from his previous smiles. Softer, more honest, since I realized that beating you once with a technical advantage didn't prove I was better. It proved I was lucky. The arena had gone quiet enough to hear individual heartbeats. So what? Ren said slowly. You're forfeiting. I'm saying fight me at full capability. No tricks, no pressure points, no technicalities. Just skill. Ren picked up the beacon, turning it over in her hands. It was scorched, damaged, a memento of cooperation under fire. She looked at Eli, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Not an enemy, not even a rival, an equal. No, she said. No, no. Fight. She held up the beacon. You're right. You got lucky in the tournament. But I got lucky in the simulation where even the posting can go to whoever comes second in the rankings. I've got a better idea. She closed the distance between them, and for a moment everyone thought violence was imminent. Instead, she extended her hand, not for a strike, for a handshake. Partners, she said. Frontier posting together because apparently we're less likely to die when we're annoying each other. Eli stared at her hand like it might explode. Then he took it. Partners, he agreed. Omir pulsed with colors that translated roughly to what just happened. And do I still get paid? In the stands, Burroughs updated his report for the final time. He titled it Case Study in Human Competitive Pair Bonding Rituals. Conclusion: they domesticated each other through mutual violence, and nobody died. His supervisor would cite it in academic papers for decades. 6 months later, Frontier Station Pan received 2 new combat instructors. They arrived together, argued constantly, fought in practice sessions that required structural reinforcements, and were absolutely insufferable to everyone around them. They were also the most effective combat team the frontier had ever seen. Are they together? Asked a confused alien cadet watching Ren and Eli coordinate. Training demonstration with the precision of people who'd either spent too much time fighting each other or too much time studying each other, possibly both. Defined together, replied the station commander. Are they romantically involved? The commander watched Ren execute throw that Eli countered by turning it into a joint lock that Ren escaped by doing something that looked anatomically inadvisable. They ended the sequence by both landing hits simultaneously, then arguing about who'd won. Honestly, the commander said, I don't think even they know, but they're terrifying, effective, and seem happy. With humans, that might be as good as it gets. In the practice arena, Ren and Eli reset for another round. You're getting slow, she observed. You're getting predictable, he countered. Want to bet on who wins this round? Loser buys dinner. Deal. They engaged, and it was beautiful, brutal, and precisely balanced. Some species the galaxy had learned bonded through grooming rituals or pheromone exchange or elaborate courtship dances. Humans apparently bonded by hitting each other repeatedly until they figured out if the other person was worth keeping around. The method was questionable. The results, however, were hard to argue with, especially since nobody wanted to get close enough to argue with either of